She's zip-tied to a chair in a Choi Syndicate warehouse. They want to trade. Soulport territory for her life. They think they have leverage. They think her husband will negotiate. They don't know three things. 1. Kang Tae-hyun doesn't negotiate. 2. He spent 3 years not touching her because he was afraid of what he'd become if he did. And 3. Last night, he finally touched her. Now someone's taken her. Now the restraint is over. To understand why Seoul is about to burn, you need to go back 3 years. To the day she walked into his compound and traded her freedom for her brother's life. To the marriage contract signed without a kiss. To the 3 years he built an empire around her while sleeping in another room. This is the story of a man who tried to love without taking, and what happens when someone forces his hand. If you've ever wondered what real restraint looks like, hit that subscribe button, and can you let me know where you're watching from? You're going to want to see how this ends. 3 years earlier, Amari Bennett walked past armed guards like she'd done it 1,000 times before. She hadn't. Her hands shook as she signed the guest log, but she kept her face steady. The guards didn't stop her. They'd been told to expect her. The compound sat in Gangnam, hidden behind legitimate real estate holdings and corporate shells. To the outside world, Kang Tae-hyun was a developer. To those who mattered, he was something else entirely. Amari was led through marble hallways into a glass-walled office overlooking Seoul. The man behind the desk didn't look up immediately. He finished reading whatever document held his attention, then set it aside with the precision of someone who controlled every moment of his day. When Kang Tae-hyun finally looked at her, his expression gave nothing away. "Miss Bennett," he said. His English was perfect, accent barely detectable. "You asked for this meeting. I'm listening." Amari had practiced this speech for 2 days. Now, standing in front of him, every word felt fragile. "My brother made a mistake," she began. "Your brother transported classified documents for the Choi Syndicate," Tae-hyun corrected. "He didn't make a mistake. He committed an act of war. He didn't know what he was carrying. Ignorance isn't innocence in my world." Amari's throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. "The Choi Syndicate used him. He's a law student. He thought he was doing someone a favor. And now both organizations want him dead," Tae-hyun said. "The Choi's because he's a loose end. Me because his existence is an insult. I'm not here to beg for mercy." "Then why are you here?" Amari reached into her bag slowly, knowing guards were watching. She pulled out a folder and placed it on his desk. "I'm here to make a trade." Tae-hyun opened the folder. Inside were her credentials, degrees in urban planning, her work portfolio, references, and something else. See, marriage license application. Blank, except for her signature. He studied the papers for a long moment. "You're offering yourself," he said finally. "Marriage under your laws," Amari confirmed. "I stay in Korea as your legal wife. Malik leaves permanently. Under your protection. No consummation, no romance, just a contract." "And you believe this benefits me? How?" "The Choi's know you're untouchable, but if you have a wife, an American wife with connections, someone visible, you gain legitimacy. Your business holdings look cleaner. Your profile softens." Tae-hyun leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "You've done your research." "I'm not stupid, just desperate." "Desperation makes people reckless. Desperation makes people useful," Amari countered. "I'm an urban planner. I understand cities, infrastructure, development. I can be valuable to you. I have consultants. Do any of them have a reason to be loyal?" That made him pause. "If I agree," he said slowly, "there are conditions. You don't leave Seoul without my permission. You attend public events as my wife when required. You live in my home." "Separate rooms," Amari said quickly. "Separate wings," he agreed. "But understand something, Miss Bennett. Once you're mine on paper, the Choi Syndicate will see you as mine in every way. They'll target you to get to me. I'll take that risk." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them. "Because Malik is all I have left," Amari said quietly. "Our parents are gone. He's 23 years old and terrified. If he dies because he was naive, I'll never forgive myself. Taehyun stood, walking to the window, Seoul stretched out below them, glittering and vast. I could kill him quietly, he said without looking at her. No one would question it. The problem disappears. But you haven't. No. Why not? He turned to face her then, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his expression, something almost like respect. Because you walked in here knowing I could kill you both, and you negotiated anyway, he said. That takes either courage or stupidity. I haven't decided which. Does it matter? Not particularly. He returned to his desk, pulled out a pen, and signed the marriage application. We'll make this legal within the week. Your brother leaves Korea within the month. If he ever returns, the deal is void. Amari felt her knees weaken with relief, but she kept standing. Thank you. Don't thank me, Taehyun said. You just traded your freedom. There's nothing to be grateful for. The wedding happened on a Tuesday afternoon in a private office with 2 witnesses. Taehyun's lawyer and his head of security stood silent as the officiant recited the legal requirements. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. Amari wore a simple navy dress she'd bought the day before. Taehyun wore the same suit he'd worn to their first meeting. When the officiant asked if they would honor the commitment of marriage, they both said yes, with the enthusiasm of people signing a business contract. Because that's what it was. There was no kiss. The officiant didn't even suggest it. He simply declared them legally married, handed them the certificate, and left. Taehyun's security chief, a man named Jun Seo, gave Amari a single nod before exiting. The lawyer followed without a word. Then it was just the 2 of them. Your things were moved to the East Wing this morning, Taehyun said. You have a bedroom, an office, and a private bathroom. The kitchen staff will prepare whatever you need. If you require anything else, tell Jun Seo. Where's your room? Amari asked. West Wing. Opposite ends of the penthouse. She shouldn't have felt relieved, but she did. I have work to return to, Taehyun continued. You're free to do as you like, within reason. The driver will take you anywhere in Seoul. Don't answer the door after 10 p.m. Don't speak to strangers about our arrangement. And don't lie to me. Ever. I won't. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe her. Good, he said finally. Then he walked out, leaving her alone with a marriage certificate and no idea what came next. That night, Amari unpacked in a bedroom larger than her entire apartment back in Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The bed was enormous, the closet already filled with clothes in her size that she hadn't asked for. She pulled out her sketchbook and tried to draw, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. Eventually, she gave up and just stared at Seoul's skyline, wondering what kind of life she'd just signed up for. In the West Wing, Taehyun sat in his study staring at the marriage certificate. His father's voice echoed in his head, a memory from childhood. Love is just another word for ownership, Taehyun. The moment you let a woman matter, she becomes a weapon someone else can use against you. His father had loved his mother obsessively, and when she tried to leave, he'd made sure she never could. The details didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the lesson. Taehyun had built his empire on control. He controlled his emotions, his organizations, his enemies. He didn't make reckless decisions. He didn't act on impulse. But when Amari Bennett had walked into his office with that ridiculous marriage proposal, something had shifted. She wasn't what he expected. She was scared, but steady. Desperate, but dignified. And when she'd said Malik was all she had left, he'd heard something in her voice that he recognized. Loneliness. He locked the certificate in his desk drawer and poured himself a drink he didn't want. This was a transaction, nothing more. He just needed to keep reminding himself of that. The first month was the strangest of Amari's life. She'd expected prison. Instead, she got routine. She woke up early, had breakfast alone, and went to work at the mid-tier planning firm where she'd been employed for 6 months. No one there knew about her marriage. She told her supervisor she needed to stay in Korea for family reasons, and he'd accepted it without question. Tae-hyun was a ghost in her life. She'd see evidence of him, a jacket left in the foyer, the smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway, but rarely the man himself. They'd cross paths maybe twice a week, always briefly. "Good morning," he'd say. "Morning," she'd reply. Then he'd leave, and she'd be alone again. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt surreal. Malik called every few days from Chicago, where Tae-hyun had relocated him under a new identity with a full scholarship to finish law school. "Are you okay?" Malik asked during one call, his voice tight with guilt. "I'm fine," Amari lied. "You don't sound fine." "I'm adjusting." "Amari, you don't have to do this. I can figure something else out." "Malik, stop. It's done. You're safe. That's what matters." Silence on the other end. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know. Now focus on your degree and stop calling me every 2 days. You're safe. Live like it." She hung up before he could argue. The truth was, she didn't know if she was okay. Her life had become a waiting game, and she didn't even know what she was waiting for. Then things started changing. It began small. A permit for her affordable housing project that had been delayed for months suddenly cleared. Then a city councilman who'd blocked her proposal was removed from his position for corruption charges. Then funding appeared from an anonymous donor. Amari wasn't stupid. She knew who was behind it. She confronted him on a rare evening when they were both in the penthouse at the same time. "Why are you helping my project?" she asked, finding him in his study. Tae-hyun didn't look up from his laptop. "You're my wife. Your success reflects on me." "I didn't ask for your help." "You didn't need to." "That's not how this works." "Isn't it?" He finally looked at her, expression neutral. "You're living in my home. You carry my name. Did you think I'd allow you to fail publicly?" "This isn't about me failing. This is about you controlling something else in my life. I'm ensuring you succeed. There's a difference." Amari's hands clenched into fists. "I don't need you to build my career." "Perhaps not, but I'm doing it anyway." "Why?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. Then it was gone. "Because you're brilliant at what you do," he said, quietly. "And brilliant things shouldn't be buried under bureaucracy and corruption." Before she could respond, he returned to his laptop. Conversation over. Amari left his study more confused than angry. The second year was harder. Amari's career flourished in ways she couldn't ignore. She was promoted twice. Her housing project broke ground ahead of schedule. Architects who'd never given her the time of day suddenly wanted to collaborate. And behind every success, she could feel Tae-hyun's invisible hand. It should have made her grateful. Instead, it made her furious. "I'm not your charity case," she told him during another confrontation. "I never said you were." "Then stop treating me like one. I'm treating you like my wife. We're not really married." The words hung in the air between them. Tae-hyun set down the document he was reading and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Aren't we?" he asked softly. Amari didn't have an answer for that, because somewhere between the separate wings and the silent dinners and the carefully maintained distance, something had shifted. She'd started noticing things. The way he always made sure there was coffee ready when she woke up. The way his driver somehow knew her schedule without her saying anything. The way her favorite foods appeared in the kitchen without explanation. Tae-hyun was everywhere in her life except next to her, and she didn't know how to feel about that. By the third year, Amari had stopped pretending their arrangement was temporary. That same week, Tae-hyun came home with blood on his cuff. Not his blood. Amari noticed it as he passed her in the hallway, the dark stain already half-washed, deliberate. When she asked, he paused, just for a fraction of a second too long. "Old business," he said. But later that night, long after the penthouse had gone quiet, Amari stood at her window and watched unfamiliar cars idle on the street below. Black sedans, engines running, watching. Tae-hyun closed the curtains without a word. "It's nothing," he said. She believed him. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Malik had graduated law school and was building a practice in human rights law. He was safe, happy, free. She could leave. The realization hit her one morning as she was getting ready for work. She stared at herself in the mirror and asked the question she'd been avoiding. Why was she still here? The answer terrified her. That night, she started digging. She'd noticed small things over the years, financial discrepancies, payments that didn't make sense, accounts that appeared and disappeared. She was good with numbers and patterns. It was part of what made her a good planner. So she tracked them. Her apartment building in Chicago, the one she'd lived in before coming to Korea, owned by a shell company traced back to Taehyun. Her co-workers' medical bills that had mysteriously been paid when the woman was about to lose her home, an anonymous donor that didn't exist, Malik's law school debt that vanished overnight, a scholarship fund that had never been advertised. Every thread led back to him. Amari printed everything and walked to his study at midnight. She didn't knock. She walked straight in and dropped the stack of papers on his desk. Taehyun looked up from his work, unsurprised to see her. He glanced at the papers, then back at her face. "You've been busy," he said. "You paid off Malik's debt. You bought my building in Chicago. You paid my co-workers' medical bills." Her voice shook, not with fear, but with something else. Anger, confusion, something she couldn't name. "You're everywhere, Taehyun. Everywhere except—" She stopped herself. "Except where?" he asked quietly. "Except here. Except next to me." The words came out raw. "For 3 years, you've built my entire life like one of your properties, but you won't even have dinner with me. You won't sit in the same room for more than 5 minutes. You've never touched me, not once, not even by accident." Taehyun stood slowly, his expression unreadable. That was the agreement. The agreement was no consummation, no romance, not this. She gestured between them. "Whatever this is. You're in my life constantly, but you're a ghost. I don't understand." "You don't need to understand." "Yes, I do." She stepped closer. "Because I've spent 3 years wondering if I'm your wife or your prisoner or your project, and I still don't have an answer. You're free to leave any time." "Am I?" "Because every time I think about it, I realize you've woven yourself into every part of my existence. My job, my home, my brother's future. How do I leave when you're the foundation of everything?" The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. "I didn't know how to help you without—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Without what?" "Without owning you." The admission seemed to cost him something. "Everything I touch, I control. Every person who matters to me becomes something I need to protect, to manage, to possess. I watched my father destroy my mother with his love. He called it devotion, but it was just another form of violence." Amari's anger faltered. "I'm not your mother." "No, you're worse." "What does that mean?" Taehyun turned away, staring out the window at Seoul's glittering lights. "It means from the moment you walked into my office 3 years ago, I knew you were dangerous, not because of what you could do to me, but because of what I'd want to do to you if I let myself feel anything." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "And what would you want to do?" "Everything." The word was barely a whisper. "I'd want to know every thought in your head, every dream you have. I'd want to be the reason you smile and the person you run to when you're afraid. I'd want to touch you and never stop. I'd want—" He cut himself off, breathing hard. "I'd want things I have no right to want." "Who says you don't have the right?" He turned back to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because if I touch you, Amari, I won't stop. I won't be able to let you go, and you deserve the choice to walk away." "What if I don't want to walk away?" "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do." She closed the distance between them, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I've had 3 years to figure out what I want. Have you?" "Every single day." His voice was rough. Every morning I wake up knowing you're in the East Wing. Every night I go to sleep imagining what it would be like to have you next to me. Every time I see you, I have to remind myself why I can't touch you. Then stop reminding yourself. Amari, tell me to stop, she whispered. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away right now. He stared at her, jaw clenched, hands fisted at his sides. She could see the war happening behind his eyes, 3 years of restraint fighting against something far more powerful. I can't, he finally said. Can't what? Can't tell you I don't want this, because I do. God help me, I do. She reached up, fingers trembling as they touched his jaw. He flinched like she'd burned him, but didn't pull away. Then stop running, she said softly. Something broke in him. She saw it happen. The exact moment 3 years of careful control shattered. He cupped her face with both hands like she was made of glass, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt. If I do this, he said, voice shaking, if I cross this line, I know. You don't. Once I touch you, Amari, I won't be able to pretend anymore. I won't be able to keep my distance. I'll want you in ways that terrify me. Then be terrified with me. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was 3 years of starvation, 3 years of denial, 3 years of wanting something he'd convinced himself he couldn't have. His hands moved from her face to her waist, pulling her closer like he was afraid she'd disappear. Amari's fingers tangled in his hair as she kissed him back with equal desperation. This was nothing like she'd imagined. It was better and more frightening, and so overwhelming she could barely breathe. When he finally pulled back, they were both shaking. I'm still afraid, he whispered against her forehead. Of what? That I'll love you so much, I'll destroy you. Then let me be afraid too. We'll figure it out together. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I don't know how to do this halfway. Then don't. I'm not asking for halfway. They stood there in his study as Sol glittered outside the window, holding each other like they were the only solid things in a tilting world. Stay with me tonight, he said quietly. Not in the East Wing. Here, with me. Okay. He took her hand, the first time he'd ever deliberately touched her, and led her out of the study. His bedroom was simple, almost austically so. None of the luxury of the rest of the penthouse, just a bed, a dresser, and windows overlooking the city. I've never brought anyone here, he said, as if he needed to explain. I know. They lay down together, still, fully clothed, his arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she'd change her mind. 3 years, he murmured against her hair. I waited 3 years. So did I, she whispered back. I just didn't realize it until now. He kissed her again, slower this time. Taking his time, memorizing the feel of her. What happened next was theirs alone and worth the 3 years of waiting and confusion. When morning came, Amari woke up wrapped in Tae-hyun's arms. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. What? She asked, voice still rough with sleep. Nothing. Go back to sleep. You're staring. I waited 3 years. I'm allowed to stare. She smiled, pressing closer. For the first time since she'd walked into his compound, she felt like she'd made the right choice. Then his phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. His expression changed instantly, going from soft to stone in seconds. He grabbed the phone, read the messages, and his jaw tightened. What is it? Amari asked, sitting up. Get dressed, he said, already moving. Now. Tae-hyun, what's wrong? He looked at her, and the fear in his eyes made her blood run cold. The Chois know about us. They've been watching, and they just made their move. 30 minutes later, Amari sat in Tae-hyun's office while he made rapid-fire calls in Korean. Jun Seo stood nearby, face grim. What's happening? She asked when Tae-hyun finally hung up. You have a ribbon-cutting ceremony today for your housing project, he said. The one you've been working on for 2 years. Yes, at 2 p.m. You're not going. What? Taehyun, I have to go. This is the culmination of... The Chois have been tracking your schedule. They know you'll be there. They're planning something. You don't know that? Yes, I do, because it's what I would do. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. You've been invisible for 3 years, safe because you meant nothing to me publicly. But last night, he gestured between them, last night changed everything, and somehow they found out. How? It doesn't matter. What matters is you're not going to that ceremony. Amari stood, anger flashing. I've worked 3 years for this project. I'm not hiding because someone might do something. This isn't a negotiation. Yes, it is. You said I wasn't your prisoner. You said I had freedom. Or was that a lie? Taehyun's expression was torn between fury and fear. Don't do this. I'm going, Amari said firmly, with or without your permission. This is my work, my achievement. I won't let fear take that away. The standoff lasted several seconds. Finally, Taehyun nodded once, sharp and angry. Fine, but Junseo goes with you, and 6 additional security personnel, non-negotiable. Fine. She left before he could change his mind, but not before seeing the terror barely contained behind his eyes. The ceremony was supposed to be simple. City officials, a few reporters, residents of the new housing complex gathered for photos and speeches. Amari had practiced her remarks for days. This was her first major completed project, proof that her vision for affordable, dignified housing could work. Junseo and his team positioned themselves around the perimeter, alert but trying to stay inconspicuous. Amari pretended not to notice the way Junseo's hand never strayed far from his concealed weapon. She was midway through her speech, talking about community design and accessibility, when Junseo's expression changed. It happened fast. One of his team members spoke urgently into their radio. Junseo moved toward Amari with purpose. She saw his mouth form the word down just as something struck the back of her head. The world tilted. Sounds became muffled. She felt herself falling, felt hands catching her, but they weren't Junseo's hands. Then everything went black. She woke with her head pounding and zip ties cutting into her wrists. The space around her was dark except for a few industrial lights. A warehouse, she realized, old construction judging by the smell and the water stains on the concrete. She's awake, someone said in Korean. A man walked into her line of sight, late 40s, expensive suit that didn't match the warehouse setting. He pulled up a chair and sat down, studying her with the detached interest of someone examining an insect. Mrs. Kang, he said in English, I'm sorry we had to meet this way. Amari's training kicked in. Assess, observe, stay calm. You're Choi, she said. Very good. Your husband has been a problem for my organization for a long time, but he's careful. Always 3 steps ahead, always untouchable. He leaned forward, until now. He won't negotiate. Everyone negotiates when the stakes are high enough. You don't know him. Choi smiled. I know he spent 3 years keeping you at a distance. Then suddenly, last night, his entire security detail gets mobilized around you. His drivers, his surveillance, his people, all activated. For 3 years, you were background noise. Now you're priority 1. What changed? Amari said nothing. It doesn't matter, Choi continued. What matters is he finally showed his hand. He cares about you, and people who care make mistakes. What do you want? Seoul port contracts, the territory he's been blocking us from for 2 years. He has 48 hours to transfer them, or we send you back to him in pieces. Amari forced herself to stay calm, using the techniques she'd learned in her planning work. Observe the space, find the patterns, look for weaknesses. The warehouse was old, probably scheduled for demolition. Load-bearing beams showed stress cracks. The eastern wall had significant water damage. Security cameras covered most angles, but there were blind spots. You're very calm, Choi observed. Panicking won't help me. True, you're smarter than I expected. Smart enough to know this building is condemned, Amari said. See that crack in the foundation? The whole eastern section is unstable. One wrong move and it comes down. Choi laughed. Are you threatening me from a chair? I'm stating facts. I design buildings for a living. This one is dying. He stood, amusement fading. Your husband has 48 hours. I suggest you pray he values you more than his territory. He left, and Amari was alone with 2 guards. One older, experienced, barely acknowledged her presence. The other was younger, maybe early 20s, and he kept glancing at her nervously. She focused on the younger one. What's your name? She asked in careful Korean. She'd been learning for 3 years, knew enough to get by. Shut up, the older guard said. But the younger one hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything she needed to know. At the compound, Tae-hyun stood in his office staring at the message on his phone. A photo of Amari, unconscious, with coordinates and demands. Jun Seo stood nearby, bloodied from the confrontation. I failed you. No. Tae-hyun's voice was eerily calm. They had 12 men, professional extraction team. You couldn't have stopped it. What do we do? Get me everything. I want the Choi's financials, their properties, their political connections, every person who's ever taken their money. I want it within 6 hours. And the trade? Tae-hyun looked at him with eyes that held no mercy. There is no trade. There's only retrieval. He made the first call to his banker in Switzerland. Within an hour, 3 Choi accounts were frozen. The second call went to a prosecutor he'd cultivated for years. Within 2 hours, arrest warrants were issued for 5 Choi lieutenants. The third call was to the Port Authority commissioner. Within 3 hours, the Choi lost their remaining shipping permits. He wasn't negotiating. He was dismantling them piece by piece. Back in the warehouse, Amari had been talking to the young guard for hours. His name was Min Ho. He joined the Choi's 3 months ago because his family needed money. He was terrified of his bosses, but more terrified of what would happen if he failed them. This building isn't safe, Amari told him quietly. Look at the eastern wall. See those cracks? If there's any impact, earthquake, heavy machinery, anything, it could collapse. Minho looked where she indicated, and she saw doubt creep into his expression. Your boss doesn't care if you die in here, she continued. But I do, because you're young and scared, and you don't want to be here any more than I do. Stop talking, the older guard snapped. But Minho's hands shook as he held his weapon. 24 hours into her captivity, Choi returned. His confident smile was gone. What is he doing? Choi demanded. In 1 day, he's frozen our accounts, arrested our people, destroyed our shipping operations. How? I told you he wouldn't. Negotiate, Amari said. Then you're going to die. Probably. But so are you. Choi's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face went pale. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. He's dismantling us. Everything. In less than 2 days, he's erasing 20 years of work. That's what happens when you take something that belongs to him, Amari said quietly. You were supposed to be leverage. I am leverage, just not the kind you expected. Choi stared at her, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. He's going to kill us all. Yes. 36 hours after the abduction, Tae-hyun walked into the warehouse alone. No guards, no weapons visible, just him in an expensive suit, walking through the door like he owned the place. Choi's remaining men raised their weapons, but Choi held up a hand. You came alone, Choi said, surprise evident. I don't need an army for this. Tae-hyun pulled out his phone and set it on a metal table between them. In the last 36 hours, your organization has ceased to exist. Your accounts are empty. Your properties are seized. Your political protection is gone. Your people are either arrested or working for me now. He pressed play on a recording. Choi's own lieutenants, one by one, pledging loyalty to Tae-hyun in exchange for immunity. You have nothing left. Tae-hyun continued. No money, no power, no leverage. I have her, Choi said desperately, gesturing to Amari. No, you borrowed her. Now I'm taking her back. I'll kill her. Then you die 30 seconds later, and you know it. Taehyun's voice was perfectly calm. You have one option. Release her, leave Korea tonight, and live. Stay, and I'll bury you under the city you tried to take from me. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of water dripping somewhere in the warehouse. Finally, Choi nodded to his men. Cut her loose. Minho moved forward with a knife, hands shaking as he cut through Amari's zip ties. She stood carefully, legs stiff from hours in the chair. Taehyun's eyes never left hers as she walked toward him. When she reached him, he touched her face gently, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked softly. No, you came. Always. He took her hand and led her toward the exit. Behind them, Choi and his men watched in defeated silence. In the car, Amari leaned against him, shaking with delayed reaction. He held her tightly, one hand in her hair. You destroyed them, she whispered. Yes. In less than 2 days. Yes? Would you really have burned the whole city for me? He pulled back enough to look at her, and the raw honesty in his eyes made her breath catch. Without hesitation. She pressed closer, and he held her like he'd never let go. I was going to collapse the eastern wall and run, she admitted. I know. How? Because you're brilliant and resourceful, and I've spent 3 years watching you solve impossible problems. He kissed her forehead. But I'm grateful I got there first. Me too. They drove through Seoul in silence, her hand clasped tightly in his. When they finally reached the compound, Jun Seo was waiting with visible relief. Mrs. Kang, he said with a small bow. I'm not your fault, Amari interrupted. They had 12 men and a plan. You did everything you could. Jun Seo nodded gratefully and stepped aside. In the penthouse, Taehyun led her to his room. Not the East Wing anymore, but his space. Their space. I need you to know something, he said as they stood in the darkness overlooking Seoul. What I did to the Choi, that's who I am. That's what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine. I know. And you're not afraid? I was zip-tied in a warehouse for 36 hours. I had time to think about what kind of man I married. She turned to face him. You're ruthless when you need to be, but you're also the man who spent 3 years building my career while staying away because you were afraid of taking my choices. Both things are true. He couldn't stop himself anymore. He pulled her close like he was afraid they were going to take her again if he let go, and kissed her like he needed her to breathe. I don't know if I can be soft for you. I don't need soft. I need honest. Resting his forehead against hers. Then honestly, I love you. I've loved you since the day you walked into my office with that insane proposal, and I'll love you until the day I die. Even though I'm stubborn, especially because you're stubborn. She kissed him, and this time there was no desperation, just certainty. 2 weeks later, Malik flew to Seoul. He'd called 3 times a day since hearing about the kidnapping, guilt eating him alive despite Amari's reassurances. When he arrived at the compound, Taehyun met him in the study. Amari had wanted to be there, but Taehyun had asked for a few minutes alone first. You came for her 3 years ago, Taehyun said without preamble. You blame yourself for what happened. She was taken because of me, Malik said, voice tight, because I was stupid enough to... She was taken because of me. Taehyun interrupted, because I finally let myself care about her and my enemies saw it. You made a mistake at 23. I made her a target by loving her. We're not the same. Malik stared at him, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. She told me what you did, Malik continued quietly. How you dismantled an entire organization in 2 days. How you walked in there alone. I would have burned Seoul to the ground if that's what it took. That's what scares me. She's my sister, and you're... dangerous, Taehyun finished. Yes, but never to her. That's the one promise I can make you. Malik studied him for a long moment. She loves you. I can hear it in her voice when she talks about you. That's the only reason I'm not trying to convince her to leave. She's free to leave any time. Is she, though? Can you really let her go if she decides she wants out? The question hung in the air. Tae-hyun didn't answer immediately. I don't know, he admitted finally. 3 years ago, I could have. Now, I honestly don't know if I'm strong enough. At least you're honest. It's all I can offer. Amari appeared in the doorway then, looking between them. Are you two done being dramatic? Malik laughed, the sound breaking the tension. He crossed the room and pulled her into a hug. You're okay, he whispered. I'm okay. I'm so sorry, Amari. For all of it. She pulled back, holding his face between her hands. Malik, listen to me. I didn't trade my life for yours. I chose both. I chose to keep you safe, and I chose to stay with him. Both things can be true. But if I hadn't, but you did, and we dealt with it, and now you're a lawyer helping people who can't help themselves, and I'm with someone who loves me enough to face his worst fears. Good things came from hard choices. That's life. Malik looked at Tae-hyun over her shoulder. Take care of her. With everything I have. Malik stayed for 3 days, and by the time he left, some of the guilt had finally lifted from his shoulders. He hugged Amari goodbye at the airport. You're happy, he said. It wasn't a question. I am. Then I'm happy for you. He glanced at Tae-hyun, who stood a respectful distance away. He's terrifying, but he's good to you. That's what matters. That's what matters, she agreed. After Malik left, Amari threw herself back into work. Her housing project had been completed despite the kidnapping, and now other cities were reaching out, wanting similar developments. Her firm promoted her again, this time to senior planner with her own team. Tae-hyun watched her thrive with quiet satisfaction. He still helped behind the scenes. He couldn't seem to stop himself, but now he asked first. There's a councilman blocking your expansion proposal, he mentioned one evening over dinner. I know. I could handle it. How? Nothing illegal, just pressure. Amari considered it. What kind of pressure? He has development interests that conflict with yours. I could buy those interests and make them not conflict anymore. That's a lot of money. I have a lot of money. She smiled. Ask me first next time you want to help. That's all I need. I can do that. 3 months after the kidnapping, Amari was invited to speak at an international urban planning conference. The invitation came from Geneva, and it was a significant honor. She accepted immediately, then realized she'd need to leave Seoul for a week. That night, she found Tae-hyun in his study. I need to go to Geneva, she said, for a conference. He looked up from his work, expression carefully neutral. When? Next month. For a week. The silence stretched. She could see him processing, working through the instinct to say no, to keep her close, to control this. Finally, he nodded. Okay. You're not my prisoner, Amari, you never were. If you need to go, you go. She crossed to him, sitting on the edge of his desk. I need you to understand something. I'm coming back. I'm not going to Geneva to escape you. I'm going because it's my career. I know. Do you? Because I can see it in your eyes. You're terrified I won't come back. His jaw tightened. My father used to let my mother leave for business trips. She always came back. Until one day she didn't. He found her 3 days later, but by then she'd already tried to disappear. I'm not your mother. I know that intellectually. But fear isn't intellectual. Amari took his face in her hands, making him look at her. I love you. I chose you, not because I was trapped or obligated, but because you're worth choosing. 1 week in Geneva doesn't change that. What if something happens? Then you'll burn Geneva to the ground, she said with a small smile. But nothing's going to happen. I'll go. I'll speak at the conference and I'll come home to you. Promise? I promise. He pulled her into his lap, holding her tightly. 1 week. 1 week. The conference went perfectly. Amari's presentation on affordable housing design was well received, and she made connections that would benefit her work for years to come. She called Tae-hyun every night, and she could hear the relief in his voice each time. When she returned to Seoul, he was waiting at the airport personally. He pulled her into his arms the moment he saw her, not caring who was watching. Welcome home, he murmured against her hair. Told you I'd come back. I know, I still worried. You can worry, just don't let it cage me. Deal. 6 months after the kidnapping, Amari's housing project won a National Design Award. The ceremony was public, prestigious, and unavoidable. Taehyun attended as her husband, not her shadow. He sat in the audience as she accepted the award, pride evident on his face. When reporters asked about him afterward, she didn't deflect. Yes, that's my husband. No, he doesn't work in urban planning. Yes, we're very happy. That night, on the penthouse rooftop overlooking Seoul, she turned to him with a question that had been building for months. I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I ever become a cage to you, if you ever feel like you're trapped by loving me, you tell me. He looked at her in surprise. You're not a cage. You were afraid of becoming your father. I'm afraid of becoming your prison. What if loving me makes you into something you hate? Taehyun pulled her close, his expression serious. You want to know what you are to me? You're the only place I've ever felt free. For 3 years, I was trapped by my own fear. You broke that open. You make me want to be better than my father ever was. Then promise me we choose this every day, she said. Not because of a contract, not because of fear or obligation, because we want to. I promise. He kissed her, soft and certain. Every single day I choose you. They stood on the rooftop as Seoul glittered below them, hands clasped together. Both wedding rings visible, both freely given. After 3 years of distance, they'd found something neither expected. Not ownership, not obligation, but choice. The kind of love that didn't require cages because it was built on freedom. The kind of partnership that didn't need contracts because it was chosen every single day. He'd waited 3 years to touch her because he thought love was a cage. She'd waited 3 years to trust him because she thought marriage was a trap. They were both wrong. Love wasn't a cage when you held the key together. So what do you think? Could you wait 3 years for someone, or would the restraint break you first? Drop a comment below and let me know. If this story pulled you in, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where love isn't easy, but it's always worth it. Share this with someone who believes in the slow burn, the kind of love that's worth waiting for. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is finally let go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.